This was a crime that shocked and appalled two countries, leading to the criminal finding his way onto Japan's most wanted list, and self-mutilating his own face in an attempt to evade capture for his crime. This is the story of Lindsay Hawker and Tatsuya Ichihashi. Welcome back to the Raven's Room, and thank you for joining me on another true crime story. Lindsay Hawker was born in 1984. She was a 22-year-old British teacher from a village outside Coventry called Brandon. She was born to loving parents Bill and Julia Hawker. She had two sisters, and the family were a strong, caring unit. She had an active social life and was keen to further her studies after secondary school at the University of Leeds, where she went on to study biology, gaining a first honours degree in 2006. She planned to do a master's degree after this, but she decided to take a year out to travel. The travelling bug caught her, and she wanted to experience more out of life. Lindsay thought that Japan would be the perfect place to spend a gap year. Lindsay managed to land a teaching job with a company called Nova. This is Japan's largest private English conversation school. Nova is quite prestigious in its own right, and more specifically, the Tokyo branch, which is where Lindsay first got placed, which just goes to show Lindsay's capabilities. Lindsay first lived in the district of Koiba, but this was short term. She moved to Chiba, a nearby district, because it was more affordable. She was unaware at the time, but this simple decision dictated the tragic path that her life would take. Lindsay moved in with two other teachers in Chiba. The three of them got on really well and became friends. Lindsay was really enjoying her life at this point, although at times she did miss home. She missed her boyfriend, her friends and her family, but they would all remain quite close, and Lindsay would keep in touch with them regularly. Since her family were close-knit, they would often call each other every day just to check in. Around 6 months into Lindsay's stay in Chiba, she experienced a very strange encounter. A man approached her on her journey home from work. She had just gotten off the train and was unlocking her bike. The man said he was an English student of hers, but Lindsay knew this not to be true. This confused her and likely made her feel quite uncomfortable. She wasn't sure what to do at this point, so she got her bike and began cycling home to get away from the man. But to her horror, the man started to follow her, running through the streets to track her down. She sped up in an attempt to ditch him, but this didn't work. Chiba has a lot of congestion on the streets and there's a lot of walkway intersections, meaning it would have been quite difficult for her to lose him. Oddly, this man continued to try to speak with her as she was cycling away from him, asking her questions like, "Where are you from and what have you studied?" Lindsay eventually made it home, but the man also made it back to her house. At this point, Lindsay likely felt relieved because she knew her two housemates were in the house. But before Lindsay managed to get inside her house, the man again approached her. This time, he had a proposal for her. He asked her if she could give him some private English lessons, as he wanted to touch up his English because he didn't think it was that good. Lindsay, being the kind and caring person that she was, politely refused the man's request. The man, however, had one more ask of Lindsay. He asked her if he could come inside for a drink of water since he had been running all the way behind her. Lindsay, most likely surprised and taken aback by this, wasn't sure what to do. It's also important to remember she was within a new culture and wasn't sure what was normal here. Some reports also suggest that Lindsay may have believed that the man had some sort of intellectual disability and she may have felt sorry for him. Lindsay let the man in for a drink of water and made sure that her housemates seen the man. After drinking the water, the man again asked Lindsay if she would give him some private English lessons, but this time he sweetened the deal. He offered to pay her the equivalent of roughly $32 per hour. This was really tempting to Lindsay, as she could have done with the extra money, and it was really easy money at that. Lindsay decided to agree to this, and the pair arranged to meet at a cafe 4 days later. As the man was leaving, bizarrely, he pulled out some paper and a pen and started scribbling. Lindsay was unsure what he was doing, but then he handed her the piece of paper. He had sketched a picture of her along with his contact details. The man was 28-year-old Tatsuya Ichihashi. Tatsuya was born in the Gifu prefecture on the 5th of January 1979. His mum was a dentist and his dad was a medical doctor. Tatsuya attempted but failed to follow in his father's footsteps, so instead He completed a degree in horticulture. However, he never went on to actually use this degree or to get a job. He essentially lived off money that his parents sent him every month. This amount was the equivalent to about $760 per month. Although he never seemed interested in work, he was interested in romance. At this point, Tatsuya was in a year-long relationship with a Japanese woman. He was very much so into his fitness and was called a fitness fanatic by some. Every day, he cycled up to and over 25 kilometers. This probably explains why he was able to run after Lindsay while she was on her bike trying to cycle away from him the first time they met. Tatsuya had no previous convictions, but that is not because he did not commit any crimes. It's because his father had paid a settlement to a woman who accused Tatsuya of assaulting and robbing her 6 years before he'd met Lindsay. Aside from this, he seemed to keep quite a low profile. He was described by many as a loner with an interest in violent manga comics. 4 days later, after Lindsay received the sketch, the pair met at the cafe they had arranged to meet at. They met for about an hour and can be seen buying coffee before they sit down to talk. The lesson seemed to go well considering the bizarre start to how the pair met. But when the lesson was over, Tatsuya claimed that he had forgotten his money. He told Lindsay that he only lives down the street and they could get a taxi there together while he ran in to get the money. Lindsay agreed to this. Lindsay told the taxi driver to wait as she wouldn't be that long. He waited 7 minutes and then decided to leave. He probably thought that she had changed her mind. However, Lindsay would never leave Tatsuya's flat alive. Lindsay didn't show up to teach her English classes on the 25th and the 26th of March. This was completely out of character for Lindsay, and Nova reported her missing on the 26th of March. Her roommates had also tried to contact the police in this time, but the message was not conveyed to the proper authorities within the department. This was the first of many blunders on the side of the Japanese police. Back in England, over the same 2 days, Lindsay's family began to worry when they didn't hear from her. Remember, they kept in contact most days, so for them not to hear from her is quite worrying. Once the relevant police department were informed of Lindsay's disappearance, it would be a few hours before 2 officers made their way to Tatsuya's apartment. Outside the apartment, the 2 officers noticed that there was a light turned on inside and it looked like someone was moving around in there. They called for backup at 7 p.m. once they were informed of Tatsuya's previous allegations, the assault and robbery claim 6 years earlier. Within the next hour, 7 more officers arrived, meaning there were 9 officers there in total. Astonishingly, at this point, Tatsuya left his apartment with no shoes on, no socks, a rucksack, and his clothes. He managed to get past all 9 officers. Only one of the officers was able to grab onto Tatsuya's rucksack, but he still managed to break free from this and fled. None of the officers had radios, so they couldn't radio down to the officers on the ground floor, meaning that it was a lot easier for Tatsuya to evade capture. Luckily, Tatsuya was spotted a short time later, but this time he had trainers on. Police believe he had his gym clothes and trainers in his rucksack, which he was going to wash at the gym. When officers spotted Tatsuya for the second time, another chase ensued. However, again, unbelievably, Tatsuya managed to flee from the officers. He ran in zigzag formation on the street and eventually lost them. The locals believed that Tatsuya got away because the police are corrupt and they allowed themselves to be bribed. This isn't confirmed, but it would make a lot of sense because how do 9 officers let the same person get away twice? That does seem insane. The officers made their way into Tatsuya's flat. The scene they discovered was horrific. The injuries that Lindsay sustained meant that she had suffered a long and painful death. She had egg-sized bruises all over her face, likely from a fist, and she also had marks on her body which indicated that she was thrown or fell against the furniture in the room. Her belongings were also scattered everywhere. As Lindsay and Tatsuya were both familiar with martial arts, it's likely that there was quite a big struggle and this young woman fought very, very hard for her life. Tatsuya, however, was a black belt and more experienced than Lindsay. So, aside from being male, he definitely had the upper hand. It was determined that Lindsay died from strangulation and that the cartilage had been broken in her neck. Detectives believe that she had been held prisoner by Tatsuya for up to 36 hours, bound at the wrists and ankles and severely beaten before she was strangled. The fact that she was held for an entire 36 hours when her roommates had made reports to the police is absolutely devastating. Maybe if they were a few hours earlier, it would have made the difference. Lindsay's naked body was found buried in a bath filled with a mixture of compost soil and sand on the apartment's balcony. She had been bound and gagged with plastic ties and scarves, with one of her hands lying outside of the mixture. Tatsuya also sprayed the compost and soil and sand with a substance that speeds up and compacts the decomposition process. He was trying to get rid of her quickly. It's believed that he thought she would decompose quickly, especially with his background in horticulture. Tatsuya had bought the materials he needed for this over the course of 6 visits to a local hardware store, in the hours leading up to the arrival of the police on the 26th of March. Lindsay may have still been alive at this point. Bizarrely, Tatsuya also shaved her head after the attack. It's unclear why he did this. However, women's wigs were found in the apartment, indicating that Tatsuya may have been a cross-dresser, and some believe he may have shaved off her hair so he could wear it. It was at this point that the police put Tatsuya on Japan's most wanted list. In response to this, Tatsuya began to disguise himself. Firstly, he began to disguise himself as a woman, which worked quite well. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and unbelievably, the months into years. Tatsuya was evading capture. Lindsay's family were absolutely heartbroken and devastated, and they had a bone to pick with the Japanese police. They didn't believe that they were working hard enough or putting enough resources into finding Lindsay's killer. Her family made several trips to Japan to raise awareness of her case over this time.
The purpose of this trip this time?
Well, the purpose is to remind everybody, both in Tokyo and also that our daughter's murderer is still out there. We're very concerned that he hasn't been caught. We're very concerned that he might do this again. He has ruined our family. We would not like to see other families put through what we have been through.
And to say, please keep looking. It will only take one lead to find this man. And if anybody's watching this and is protecting him, don't protect him. He doesn't deserve protection. He needs to be brought to justice for what he's done.
We need your help and we appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. As a father, I am so proud of her. To travel all this way to teach. I miss her so. I've had a very fruitful meeting with the Japanese police, and I have thanked them for their efforts, and I hope they will continue to keep the good work up and eventually get a successful result in this case.
Fast forward to October 2008. The case was still open and there were a relatively large amount of officers on the case, 140 in total. However, authorities would then go on to say that they believed that Tatsuya had committed suicide. Lindsay's father, understandably, was not happy about this, and he believed police were saying this as a ploy to close down the investigation. With mounting pressure from Lindsay's father, in January 2009, police released a life-sized cutout of Tatsuya in an effort to gain more leads. Rumours began to fly that Tatsuya had fled to the Philippines, so the Japanese police decided to raise the reward money. This increase in reward money led to some substantial leads, with the most predominant one being from a plastic surgery clinic in Nagoya. In 2009, the surgeon said that Tatsuya had been to visit his clinic and that he wanted his nose uplifted and his bridge lifted higher. This by itself didn't raise any suspicions, but what did raise suspicions was that the surgeon had noticed that Tatsuya had inflicted self-mutilation in an attempt to change his appearance before this surgery. The surgeon noticed a strange abnormality on Tatsuya's nose. Tatsuya explained that he tried to make his nose thinner himself by quite literally stitching it from left to right. He did this repeatedly until the nose looked thinner. It also came to light later that Tatsuya had used box cutters to remove 2 moles on his face and a scissors to quite literally cut his bottom lip to make it thinner. The first time he tried to do this, he couldn't follow through because of the expectedly, unbelievably excruciating pain. However, he did it a second time and completed the job in a public bathroom, of all places. Tatsuya took advantage of the fact that many people in Japan pre-pandemic chose to wear face coverings and masks. This made it very difficult to identify Tatsuya and also made it easy for him to cover up the healing from his own self-inflicted mutilations. Since Tatsuya had still not been captured, Lindsay's dad was growing desperate. He went to Japan on another trip, however this time he took a different angle. He went to a bar where he knew the Yakuza frequented. The Yakuza is the Japanese version of the Mafia. He bought them 2 bottles of whiskey as a gesture of goodwill and was invited to their table. He pleaded for their help in finding his daughter's killer. They agreed, as they said they all have their own daughters. It's clear Lindsay's dad was willing to do anything to find justice for his beloved daughter. And finally, that justice would come. On the 10th of November 2009, Tatsuya was arrested whilst trying to board a ferry to Okinawa. He was charged with abandoning a body, RAPE, and murder. Tatsuya didn't put up a fight during the arrest. He actually said what his real name was and complied with the officer's directions. Due to the gravity of this case, Tatsuya needed to be escorted by many police officers to and from the courthouse and to jail. When Tatsuya's trial began, one of his lawyers tried to claim that he did not intend to kill Lindsay and that he even tried to resuscitate her. However, the crime scene did not match with his version of events. During the trial, he admitted to suffocating Lindsay to prevent her from screaming as he RAPED her. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. Lindsay's family had requested the death penalty, but the courts in Japan very rarely grant this, especially for people who have only murdered one person. The court felt that the death penalty was inappropriate because he had no previous convictions, although that's not exactly true, and because he was aged 32, they think that there would be a chance that he could be rehabilitated.
We've waited a long time for today. We've waited 4.5 years to get justice for Lindsay, and we have achieved that today, and we're very pleased.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
As a final slap in the face to Lindsay's family, Tatsuya wrote a book called Until I Was Arrested, which depicts his life on the run. It does not go into details about Lindsay's murder or why he did it, but it does go into details about how he self-mutilated his face in an attempt to disguise himself. He offered Lindsay's family royalties from this book that it might earn, but the family understandably rejected this as nothing could bring back their daughter. It's also very possible that Tatsuya is doing all of this because he wants another chance at life. He wants to be freed and viewed upon as someone who can be rehabilitated.
I'd like to speak on behalf of the whole family. Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for coming here.
Thank you, and just remember Lindsay, not for how she died, just remember Lindsay, because that's the most important thing here. Thank you.
We all loved her. I'd like you to raise a glass for a daughter a dad would be proud of anywhere in the world. Lindsay.
Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
What do you guys think? Can someone like Tatsuya actually be rehabilitated? If you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.